What I think will be for all of you, a very interesting case study from RISO. Not only, as the title implies here, it indicates that RISO was facing a decision to move their entire footprint of Oracle applications, which was running the entire business, effectively their entire backbone of the business. But to preview and sort of a spoiler alert, they did a lot of other pieces fell into place here too that were behind the story, which not to steal the thunder away from Chris, who will be walking us through that from the RISO side, but they moved their entire North America operations of Canada and US, all their data centers were collapsed and shut down and moved to AWS. So all the operational systems, infrastructure stack, third-party applications. But it gets more interesting because Chris and the team at RISO moved to AWS in 2013, number 8 years ago or so, 7, 8 years ago. So at that time, it was relatively new to do that with your Oracle, especially with an Oracle backbone. Some people at that time might have called that quite gutsy and risky. Now looking back, we can all call it visionary, right? Because the advantages of cloud, were known, but translating forward, you can see the benefits, which Chris will walk us through. The other aspect that you see here with the pandemic coming at us that we all can relate to is that it positioned the company very well to be ready for the pandemic and serve the customers internal to RISO in some ways that were unforeseen. So it is a very interesting story. So thanks for joining us again, Carla. Thanks for turning it over. I'm Bill Saltis, your host for today. I look forward to hearing from our two guests, Chris Gattoni from RISO and Raja Mani from AWS. Welcome, both of you. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Appreciate it. So let me just talk a little bit about the logistics. As most of you see, you're already on mute to minimize background noise. However, if you have any question or issue at any time, just put it into chat. Carla Roddy, our hostess today, will take care of that, monitoring chat throughout the session. We'll probably be wrapping up in about 40 minutes or so. We're going to give you back some time for today, but we will allow time at the end for you to answer your questions and dive into some of the details that you'd like to do as before we give you back the time. So let me kick off first to pull up the agenda. We're going to start off with Raja giving a very brief overview in context, if you will, around how AWS supports companies generally with enterprise workloads and what they're seeing and how they attack it and how they differentiate. And then the rest of the session really will be all Chris front and center to explain, as I said, more details than some of those highlights I just gave to you. And then we'll dive right into your questions at the end. To provide a context, I just have one slide around what role we play at Apps Associates, working side by side with Chris and his team as a service provider. To keep it relatively short, I want to highlight just 3 things, right? As you can see from the histories and credentials at the bottom left-hand side, the company's DNA is in legacy is Oracle expertise. That's really where the company was founded and comes from. However, what you'll find out from Chris's story and what RISO's done here is that our services span the spectrum not only from applications, but across the entire complete stack of infrastructure, whether it be on-premise or in the cloud, and then supporting our customers like Chris and his team, when they move forward to production and post-production. You'll also notice on the right-hand side, bottom right-hand side, under the title Oracle on AWS, we've also been working with AWS for over 8 years. For those Oracle customers that either weren't ready for SaaS or unable to go to SaaS, or to move out of their data center, move their Oracle environment, as Chris's story will unfold. And they'll come to us with questions like, what do we do with our legacy environment, our aging data centers, our infrastructure, which is the most common question, of course, and why people have examined public cloud. But more fundamentally, what's our Oracle roadmap? Can we move these environments? Can we move these applications? Can we go to SaaS? Can we eliminate some of the costs of that, or the refresh, or the hosting contracts that are coming for renewals? But if we do it, what's the benefits of it? Which it's great to have Chris on board to tell all of us, what he benefited, and it'll give you just a snippet of some of the benefits of our other customers. And then finally, we'll get some complex questions like, what about licensing and compliance, and how do we make that all fit together? So our job really is in partnership with the customers, is to help them figure out what that roadmap is, help them get to the cloud in whatever form makes sense for the company, make sure they can get there, and then manage it once they're there. So with that as background, let me pull in Raja to talk about AWS in that context of the enterprise. Raja?
Yes, thanks, Bill. I want to highlight a few points about what sets AWS apart. The first one is experience. We have been building and managing cloud since 2006. In fact, Amazon is the first company pioneered the cloud. Second point is service breadth and depth. As of now, we have 175 plus services to support any cloud workload. So if you have an IoT workload, or if you have a database workload, or if you have a big data, or if you want to create just a data lake, or if you want to do DevOps, or if you want to do create a storage backup, we have services to cover breadth and depth of any cloud workloads. And third point is pace of innovation. When we started in 2006, we have only a handful of services. Now in 2020, we have 175 services. So you can see the number of services increased since then. And not only that, number of features that we add every year keeps increasing. That's because we always work based on the customer requirements, and based on that, we provide new releases or release new services. And then the fourth point is global footprints. As of now, we have 24 regions, 76 availability zones, and 205 plus edge location throughout the globe. So what it helps with the customers, they can go global in minutes, meaning you can move your workload close to your end users. And then the fifth point is pricing philosophy. If you look at our pricing since 2006, we proactively reduced the prices 80 times to date. We constantly innovate on the hardware side, as well as we constantly innovate on the services. And also when we buy the mass, purchase the products or hardware products from the vendors, we get some savings. So we pass the savings to the end customer. And that is the reason why you see that we proactively reduce the price 80 times. And then the last point is ecosystem. So we have thousands of consulting and technology partners. And as Bill pointed out, Apps Associates is one of the partners, and they are known to be the leader and go-to partner for Oracle migration. And they are premier partner, and any Oracle migration, we always reach out to Apps Associate. Bill, can you go to the next slide? So this slide, I want to talk about the broadest and deepest choices of elastic compute cloud, meaning like compute instances that we have. So if you look at the first section under categories, you have multiple varieties here, whether it's a general purpose, burstable, compute intensive, memory intensive, storage, and dense storage, and GPU and graphics. So what that helps you is, based on your workload requirements, you can pick one from this category. So let's say that you are running a machine learning workload, you can pick from the GPU compute. Or if you are hosting a relational database that requires high input output per second, then you can pick one from the storage category. Or if you are hosting a memory intensive application, so for example, if you are hosting a memory intensive database, you can pick one instance from the memory intensive category. Now add it with the capabilities listed here. We have three choices for processor. We have AWS, so we provide our own AWS manufactured chips, or you can pick Intel, or you can pick AMD. And then when it comes to processor speed, we offer up to 4 gigahertz per second, and also high memory footprint. You can go up to 12 terabytes. And also accelerated computing and a network up to 100 gigabits per second. So you combine that category with this capability and then add it with the options for EBS. EBS stands for Elastic Block Storage. It's a hardware, hard disk where you install your operating system or application. And then Elastic Interface, Inference. You get more than 275 instance types available for any and every workload it's available to support.
Great, thanks, Raja. So Chris, we'll turn it over to you. Everybody's anxious to hear the RISO story. Why don't I give you control and you can go at your pace here.
All right, thanks a lot, Bill. So as Bill said before, my name is Chris Gattoni. I'm the IT manager with RISO Inc. or Incorporated. We're a Japanese-owned company, and I'm part of the U.S. subsidiary. And we specialize in the manufacturing and selling of specialty printers and copiers, mainly to the education and commercial market. And we're a global company. We have offices in all the continents, Africa, Europe, South America, China, and obviously Japan, our parent company. North America manages obviously the US and Canadian operations. And about 8 years ago, as Bill outlined, we kind of hit a tipping point with the company. We were moving offices and at the same time kind of splitting. So basically we had one big office with a warehouse and we were split into two separate locations. And so I was going to have, I didn't want two data centers, and the current data center I was running was probably in the size of like a classroom. And I was told it was being shrunk down to a closet. And at the time I was running around 8 racks with around 30 servers, and then all the backup tape storage that entailed cooling, independent battery power backup. We had a big battery module in that room. So all that had to go away. And we were already partners with AWS as our DBAs for our Oracle environment, our EBS. And we determined, we're like, all right, we have to do something about this. We have to shrink this down, was the first thing we kind of determined. We have to reduce costs. I had a firm budget for the move. And I had a lot of vendors at the time. We had, Dell, IBM, a couple other vendors at the time that kind of just support that data center. And we were looking to reduce that at the time. And to upgrade, it was all aging hardware, especially on the Oracle side. We're running old IBM servers for EBS and for our OBIE environments, and those wouldn't need to be upgraded. And that was going to be a significant capital cost. So we had a budget for this move, and the last thing the company also wanted to do was invest capital expenses to new hardware, and the room was getting, and the room was getting shrunk down from a classroom to, a closet. So at the time, we partnered with Apps, and we were looking at colos because those were very popular at the time, the rack spaces of the world. And we were also looking at Azure, and we were looking at AWS. And pretty quickly, we ruled out the rack spaces. It didn't fall within the budget. And at the time, Azure was known more as a development solution. And I was looking more for a pure infrastructure as as a solution. So that kind of fit in then with AWS. So that was our analysis. And then we had to do a POC. So what we first did is we took some critical applications. We took our Oracle development environment. We took some critical SQL applications we had, and what we did was we first tried to convert these to AMIs to upload to a VPC that we spun up very quickly. And it worked for some of these legacy applications. It definitely did not work for other ones, or development was just getting too long. So what we determined was the best thing to do is let's spin up an instance that most closely matches what we're running on-prem at the time, and install the application and then restore from a backup. And that's what we did for a lot of it. And that actually worked really well for us. And once we got that process down of spinning up, installing, restoration, things started moving very, very quickly. We developed pretty much a script on how to move all this environments. The big one, of course, was Oracle, the EBS environment. And at the time, we were running 11.5, 11.5.9, I think, or 11.5.11. I apologize, it was a while ago. I think it was 11.5.9. It was an aging version of Oracle, and it was still on a 32-bit platform. And the options for 32-bit in AWS were few at the time. And so we had when we tried to match one-to-one on-prem to AWS, we got Oracle out there, and the performance just took a massive hit. So we got a big issue with performance, but one of the advantages with AWS, we were able to react to it so quickly. We recognized the problem fairly quickly, especially in our POC. And even on a 32-bit platform, crazy, I know. What we did is we were able to load balance the environment across multiple 32-bit instances. Like we split the database layer across 3 32-bit instances. We split the application and the contract module went on its own instance. The financial module went on its own instance. And by doing that, it bought us some time before we upgraded Oracle itself. And I was able to at least replicate the on-prem performance I had. So I wasn't losing anything. It complicated the environment, but from a user standpoint and delivery of goods and services to the end users, they didn't see any performance by the time we went to go live. And then we slowly started migrating out of the subsequent databases. We put an AD instance out there. We moved our file server out there. We just slowly started migrating all these applications to AWS. So at the end of the day, I went from, like I said, 5 racks, 30 hard servers to now I run a data center size of a closet, and we have three on-prem servers. Everything else is out in the cloud. And this was 8 years ago, and we've just only increased our use of AWS. I'm a smaller shop. It's just me and 2 other gentlemen, and obviously we have Apps Associates to back us up. But my team doesn't really have to focus on managing a data center anymore. Once we moved to the cloud, I immediately saw the benefit where I was able to align IT more with the goals of the company, and getting out of hardware maintenance was the best thing we could possibly done, especially for a team my size. Right before we migrated to AWS, we were spending 80% of our time just keeping those servers running and not delivering anything to the company. And when there were big projects come along and stuff, it was very difficult to manage projects, or if we needed new hardware, it took time to scope out hardware and get it spun up and stuff like that. Even using some VMware at the time or hypervisor we had, it was still very complicated. By moving to AWS, it freed up my team to deliver goods and services more to the end users in the company, to do better project management. And it was the first real eye-opener for people in my company outside of IT was, we're rolling out a new equipment, and our pro services and R&D people came to me and they're like, we need a server, we need to test the print drivers for the equipment across a wide array of environments. And before, we would have to, either do a virtual machine for them, or if they wanted a hard box, we'd have to purchase it, set it up, with a capital expenditure, and it was a kind of a long tail to that. I was able to deliver an environment for them to do their testing in within, less than a week by being on AWS. And once they were done with it, we just shut it down, wiped it out, and moved on. And they were just like, seriously? They weren't even ready for it. They were expecting that month-long delay or weeks-long delay to get something to them. And I delivered it to them. Like, wow, what's this? And I experienced it now in the cloud. You access it this way, but you're still getting all the advantages of having a server sitting next to you. And that was the first real eye-opener to the possibilities of running in a cloud environment in the company. And at the same time, we brought in Apps Associates, that manage services to help us not only manage our Oracle environment like they've always done, but to also help us manage this AWS environment and to augment my team.
So this slide here is kind of what my architecture looks like today. The big one is obviously our AWS cloud, where we run all our production infrastructure in the North Virginia area. And then we have our corporate offices in Burlington. We have our Canadian office, a warehouse. We have our East Coast warehouse, which is out of Alabama. And then we have other offices in Woburn, Massachusetts. So they all tie into AWS. That's where, like I said, we have our Oracle environment running and other applications. And another advantage of AWS that for a company my size, I was never really able to do when we were on-prem, but I was able to take advantage of by being in the cloud was developing a disaster recovery area. Before, I just didn't have the budget or the personnel or the wherewithal to do an independent on-prem data center maybe somewhere else. But with the advantages of AWS, we were very quickly able to do like a pilot light VPC over in the Oregon region, which has a copy of our Oracle database and our other critical applications. It's a pilot light, so it's constantly being updated with transactional records from Oracle and other records to production. And should there ever be any kind of disaster scenario in my corporate offices or, God forbid, North Virginia, we could quickly cut over the VPN tunnels, kill the primary VPN tunnels to North Virginia, spin up the VPN tunnels that we already have in place to Oregon, blow up the VPC, spin out all the AMIs and instances in it, and be off and running. We test this yearly, and we got it down to if there's ever a major outage or disaster in one region, we could start spinning and working within 24 hours in Oregon if need be. I was never able to do that before by being on-prem. Next slide. Yeah, so this is just, some fancy quotes from me and my boss concerning the project to AWS and, working with Apps Associates. We've been partners with them. We were actually their third customer with apps. So it's more, for us, it's more than just a normal vendor relationship. I really do feel like it's a partnership. As RISO has grown, in some cases shrunk, and then grown again over its business life, I can honestly say it's been the same with Apps Associates, and fantastic company. I can't speak highly enough for them. They really do augment my ability to perform my job, and not only that, like the skill and knowledge they bring, especially to that Oracle environment, because we do have a lot of customizations on it that sit on top of it. It's extremely helpful, and cost savings too. That's what management likes about them. So here are the results of movement making this change over time is, we've got off the capital expenditure gravy train. We're on an OpEx model now. And I meet with apps. We have biannual reviews of the AWS environment. AWS moves so fast. And as Maja mentioned, they're constantly growing, adding new instant types, the costs change. And as a customer on it, I couldn't manage all that by myself. I just don't have the time to stay on top of every single thing that AWS is doing. And that's where a company like Apps Associates helps me. And we review our VPC twice a year. And we identify, hey, you know what? There's a new instance type. For example, this happens all the time. There's a new instance type that's faster, better, more storage, and it runs cheaper than the one you're having now. And then we always plan to migrate over. So even if the costs wash out at the end of the day, the value grows because we're getting better equipment, newer equipment, running on fast, better, more efficiencies for either less or the same costs. But granted, there's a lot of work involved in, evaluating where to go to for your company and its business needs, and having someone like Apps who knows that environment and can stay on top of all those changes and bring those recommendations to someone like me is very helpful. And we consolidated, like I said, at the time when we were on-prem, we had a lot of vendors involved with maintaining that data center. Now it's really just AWS and Apps Associates, so that's very helpful. And the legacy environments, by utilizing AMIs and, like I said, getting I can't speak for the other clouds like Google or Azure, but I know with Amazon, even with if the AMI or instance is not a perfect fit, there's enough elbow room, headroom in there where you can kind of modify and work with it to get your legacy solutions running. There is always a solution for even older equipment. And we located headquarters with literally no interruption to business. It was actually a very successful project. Which brings us kind of to what's going on with COVID and why Bill really wanted to have this. I made the comment to one of my people I work with at Apps. It's like, I told him, I feel like I've been getting ready for COVID for the past 10 years. By diversifying and distributing and putting so many applications and stuff out to the cloud. In February, we started having management meetings because of the lockdowns in China could possibly affect our manufacturing and our ability to get parts for our equipment. And at the time, it was just focused on logistics, but it kind of let a bell off and like, well, all right, this could be much more serious than we initially tested. So at that time, I even started evaluating between my staff and Apps Associates, what's going to be our response? What's the worst case scenario here? And we started doing analysis, and what we found is we were in a very, very strong position to deliver business functions, even distributed. We didn't need to be in a physical office. And the biggest reason for that is the fact that the data center could be accessible from anywhere, securely and consistently, and like, you know, we weren't tied to a physical location by being in AWS. And in fact, just by happenstance, in January, one of the last really hard ties to a physical location for us is we had our client VPN, which was like a hard box in our corporate offices. And just by happenstance, in January, we migrated that to a virtual box sitting in our VPC on AWS. The company is Barracuda. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they had a security device in the AWS marketplace. We brought our own license, used our own license model. So we took the license from our hard box, moved it to the box that we spun up in AWS. And that was really the last connected tissue from an infrastructure standpoint to our physical location. So once, you know, the pandemic hit hard and the lockdown started happening, we're out of Boston, by the way. My team was able to quickly not have to worry about managing a data center. I wasn't worried about, what happens if power goes out in the building and we can't get access? What happens if, you know, is the AC running and making sure nothing's running too hot? You know, does a machine need to be rebooted? I didn't have any of those worries because I knew I could always ask I could always hit my data center, which was in AWS. And we were able to kind of really focus on delivering services to our end users. We had a lot of people who've never worked from home before. So we had to get them set up, as I'm sure everyone here has, you know, laptops, monitors. Hey, this is how you use a VPN and stuff like that. And it was a big relief, and we had no interruption of business. I mean, we did our business cycle runs from April to April. We had to vacate offices late March. We were able to successfully close our business year, do our year-end audit, and onboard a new management team from our parent company, RKC, all within a month and a half, all remotely with no interruption of business. A lot of it due to the fact that everything was in AWS. I got a raise. If you all know, you know, that's all you need to know about it. Very unexpected. I got a raise, and the big reason was due to the performance of the IT department to able to do its job in a time of crisis. And we weren't rushing around. It wasn't like our hair was on fire. I wish I could say the same for some of my colleagues in their departments, in their business, you know, what they needed to do. But as far as IT was concerned, we were ready to rock and roll. So yeah, it was an eye opener. Unfortunately, we had very little gaps. Next slide. I probably went a little bit fast, and I apologize, but you know, that was kind of 10 years wrapped up in about 20 minutes. But you know, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Raja. So as I said at the top, very interesting case study. And the interesting thing is Chris is, as I said, is pretty modest here, right? And that he's representative, even to the size of the company, of some of the stories we hear from all of our Oracle customers at scale. We just completed in April the largest footprint, we're told, ever to go to AWS, and one of the largest footprints our teams has ever seen being moved from Oracle to AWS. And same kind of benefits, same kind of issues, and now the same kind of advantages for, you know, situations like COVID. And the comment was, we wish we had that, you know, for the COVID environment. So it was really interesting, Chris, and it does happen at scale. I'd like to turn it over to the audience, address some of the questions to our experts here. While we're gathering some of those questions, remember to put it in chat so Carla can do a readout of them here. As we're doing that, there's a couple things. One is to wrap up. I want to bring you back to what I said in the beginning, highlighting one of the points about, Oracle enterprises in the environments where a lot of companies are coming and they're not ready. They're not able to, of course, you're probably in the same boat. Most companies are, can I go? Or I'm unable to go because, I can't match, there's gaps in my footprint. And so last year we had asked an independent firm to do a survey of over 300 IT decision makers. And these would be decision makers that had budgetary approval over their Oracle environment and usually over the whole IT department. And you can see some of the response data here. I'm sure you see yourselves in these responses. Most reflection of the customers that we're talking to, but it's very clear of two things. One is they have to get to cloud, or they have to get to a better operational position in terms of cost and benefit to the company and servicing the company. That's sort of the corporate edict, and it complies with the story you just told, Chris. People are looking at ways to get more efficient and more effective, but there's a lot of concern and risk as it's seen reflected here in the data and in what's told to us all the time. But the underlying thing always ends up with, but if I can get there, if I can do it, I'm sure, this is the way to go. Just how to help me, figure that out. So we do have a program, we call it Take the First Step, sort of the marketing spin on it, but it is really true. You can go to this URL, or when you get the recording from this webinar, click on this and you choose your path. Just like Chris, you might want to do a POC of your enterprise applications or your Oracle database in a managed environment with Oracle RDS, or maybe your modernization of your analytics environment, or you have just fundamental questions about, if I go, will I be compliant with licenses? You let us know. We can help you understand what that is, as I said, and be happy to do so. So with that, let me pull in the two experts here and see if you have any questions. Kyla, if I could turn it over to you, see what you have.
Yes, thank you, Bill. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. The first one is, are you running Oracle Process Manufacturing in cloud? I think that's to you, Chris.
No, we're running contracts, financials, inventory, and field service. All our manufacturing is done by our parent company in Japan.
Okay, great. Thank you. And another question is, how long did it take to complete the entire migration?
We did it it was a few years ago, but it was probably, I want to say, 7 months. We did a lot of iterations, especially on the Oracle side. We probably did that migration to the VPC at least 3 to 4 times, tightening it up every single time and testing different instance types. We spent almost 2 months on developing AMIs and for that. And like I mentioned in the call, for a lot of some of that applications, the AMI path just didn't work. So we kind of had to table that and start fresh. But
Great.
again,
and are you on?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say again, one of the advantages with the AWS is it's easy, if I make a mistake and purchase the wrong server, it's bad. Now I'm sitting on equipment that I may not necessarily need. We would create VPCs very fast, very quickly, get some applications out there, make notes of it, and then just wipe it out. And the cost to the company to do that so many times is very minimal. and that's the advantage of some of AWS could offer.
Carl, if I could add
Thank
to
you.
what Chris is saying too, from what we're seeing today, you know, Chris did this many years ago, but some of the migrations we're seeing now and some of the tools, some of the development, you know, that we've done over the years with AWS. I was mentioning that largest environment that we finished in April. That was done in a 4-month sprint. So we're averaging about 3 or 4 months. Some are going 6 months, depending on the iterations that Chris is talking about. So, you know, Oracle customer will always have enterprise workloads. You'll do dev, test, prod, you know, pre-prods environments, and you're testing each of those as you're going through and iterating. That really what consumes the time frame. But just to give you a kind of a range.
And I mean, just to clarify, this was 8 years ago, which in the cloud world might as well be 1,000 years ago. And we were, I think I was told by our AWS rep at the time, we were I think the 6th company in the country, or at least on the East Coast, to move their Oracle migration, to migrate their Oracle production to a VPC. A couple companies before us had moved like maybe their dev and test, but we were one of the first to actually move their production to a VPC environment.
Right.
Another question is, are you on R12 Plus now?
We are. We're on R12 Plus. We did that upgrade to the application 2 years ago. And again, the advantages of AWS. When the very first time we upgraded, we did like the dry run upgrade test grade. It was like 2 weeks because we were so far behind in 11.5.9. We had a bunny hop. It wasn't a straight path to R12 Plus. But we're, again, the power of AWS. We were able to reiterate that. So by the time the project was just under a year for the upgrade with all the testing and obviously the data migrations and stuff like that. But again, from that very first time we upgraded, just a dry run of the application to the time we did the cutover, we reduced it from like a week and a half, 2 weeks to we did it over a weekend. And I was just being able to reiterate and tighten up those scripts. And again, that's the power of AWS. If I was on-prem, I wouldn't be able to do so many cycles so easily.
Great. And just, I think we have time for one more question here, and it was, what was your biggest challenge in migrating the Oracle environment?
I was terrified of that 32-bit issue when we first migrated. Again, there wasn't a lot of instance options. And let's be honest, even back then, 8 years ago in AWS, I knew it was only a matter of time before they tombstone or decommissioned any 32-bit option, which was actually one of the bullets in my belt when I went to try to justify the upgrade to R12. But again, I didn't know if that was going to get approved, when it would get approved, and I felt like I had a ticking clock. Where, like I said, we were able to work around it using the workloads and stuff like that. But that weighed heavily on me for a little while, how long I was going to have access to a 32-bit. But we were also at the same time, again, to the power of AWS. Worst case scenario, if they got rid of 32-bit AMIs, it doesn't mean I had to turn off mine. It wasn't like they're automatically going to go away. Pricing may have changed. But you could like almost download like that AMI and just keep it in your back pocket to run your environment. If your application runs on it and it runs good, and you don't have a business justification to move to a different type, AWS, as far as I know, they're not going to take it away from you. You kind of just keep running it, but with the added risk of knowing if it, should fail or something should happen to that environment, you may not necessarily be able to just quickly spin up another one somewhere else.
Great, thank you. I think that concludes for the questions. Bill, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, again, thank you, Carla. And I will remind you that we are going to be sending up follow-up emails where you'll have a link to the recording for today's session. Chris and Raja, as always, are available to help us with any further questions. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Chris, and for Roger for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.